Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I'm doing a book review on the Finishing School series by Gail Carriger. This series consists of 4 books. We have Etiquette and Espionage, Curtsies and Conspiracies, Waistcoats and Weaponry, and Manners and Mutiny. I love these books, I have to say. I gave the first one a 3 stars, the middle 2 4 stars, and the last one 5 stars. The books are a YA fantasy steampunk series set in 1851 to 1853 or 54. It follows a young girl who is about 14 at the beginning of the series, I think, and by the end of it she's either 16 or 17. It's unclear. But either way, you follow her through a couple of years at this finishing school. Her mother is very sick of Sophronia, our main character, and decides to send her off to this well-known finishing school. So Sophronia goes, rather unwillingly, because she doesn't want to go to a finishing school to learn how to curtsy and which fork to use. But she gets there and it turns out that this finishing school is 1, a dirigible that flies around Dartmoor, and 2, not quite your traditional finishing school. It is instead a finishing school where you learn etiquette and waistcoats and curtsies and all of that, but you also learn how to gather intelligence, and I have to put all 3 of the books, or 4 of the books, I have to put several books down because they're heavy. But you also learn how to gather intelligence and how to kill people. And then once you finish, which is the school equivalent of coming out at the time, you either get married and become an intelligencer that way, so you marry high up and figure out what Parliament's doing and how to stop that or get it through or what have you, or you go travel around single or married, it depends on the girl's talents, and you either gather intelligence or kill somebody. That is one of the things I liked about this series. It didn't focus specifically on assassinations. For example, Nevernight focuses on assassinations, that's what the school is known for, and while I absolutely adore that series, I found it fascinating to read a series that is about both intelligence and assassination as opposed to one or the other. It focused more heavily on the intelligencing as well, which I loved. Sophronia, as it turns out, has a talent for this kind of thing, and she very quickly makes friends in her age group. She also makes an enemy who turns up several places throughout the series, and I loved it. The villains are interestingly named for the most part. Well, they're not strictly speaking villains. They're against supernatural creatures. So in this series there are vampires and there are werewolves, and they have a council of shadows which advises Queen Victoria. As it turns out, there's also a group of men called the Picklemen, and they don't like supernaturals in any shape, so they just don't want the vampires and werewolves to be anywhere near the throne. And Sophronia has a couple of run-ins with all 3 of those groups, vampires, werewolves, and picklemen. It's fascinating. They also have a boys' school called Bunsen, which is for evil geniuses, and I loved watching the relationship because you're not supposed to court them, but you can flirt with them and sort of practice your seduction skills on them. The first book, like I said, I gave it 3 stars. It is definitely the start of a series. The writing was good but not great, and it does develop throughout the series. I loved watching Sophronia begin her relationships in this. There is a budding romance in this as well. She starts flirting with one young man, and that goes interestingly, and then she starts out friends with another young man who is actually a sooty, which means that he is down in the bottom of the dirigible that the school is, helping to keep the engines running with coal for the steam power, and that way the dirigible keeps flying. I enjoyed her relationship and her sort of blasé way of not caring what class of society she hung out with. I think the look, it wasn't a look at classism, but it did sort of imply that that was a thing, very much so because she has several friends who are much higher up in society than she is, and one of them sees anybody lower than her class as a charity case, and so Sophronia gets worried because she doesn't see them like that, and she doesn't want them to feel like that. I enjoyed that play. There's also sort of a inferences to race in this. One of the cities, the one that becomes her friend, is named Phineas Crow, but everybody calls him Soap. And as it turns out, they call him Soap because he needs it more than everybody else, which was a line that made me uncomfortable when I read the next part that said Sophronia realized his skin was black underneath the soot. I get the reference, but at the same time it did still make me a little bit uncomfortable because that line is fine and I'm not sure where that stands on it. Either way, Soap became one of my favorite characters very quickly. He is just the best and I love him. And his and Sophronia relationship goes in depth throughout the next 3 books and it's fantastic. The girls talk about boys, but they also talk about deadly plants and which weapon they would rather. Sophronia really likes crossbows. One of them likes garrote. So it's just very interesting. One of the, I guess, more minor problems I had was the timeline. Like I said, it's a little bit unclear. It mentions 1851 in this book, and by the 3rd book, it mentions 1853. It mentions their ages a couple of times, but it's never crystal clear what year you're in or what semester of school they're in. They just sort of mention, oh, it's a coming out ball. Oh, look, it's spring, but they don't mention the year of the spring or anything like that. So it's a little bit hard to keep track of what year they're in. However, so long as you know they're in the early 1850s, you're safe. And also they grow up and they're good. I liked the fact that Sophronia isn't drop dead, but she's also not this meek, mousy, sort of stereotypically ugly person. And the girls were all very different personality-wise and also looks-wise. And it was something that was talked about in terms of what to wear to seduce men. And so it wasn't, you have to look this one way. It was, we can work with this and make you look absolutely stunning regardless of what society says. And I liked that quite a lot. Overall, the inferences to race and classism were interesting to look at. I think they did a good job showing what it would have been, more or less, in 1850s. Nowadays it's a little bit uncomfortable, but I think they did a good job with that in here. I really love the girls' friendships and the description of the clothes and how that played into it. I loved the setting. Loved it, because a school in a dirigible is just fantastic. The fact that it's steampunk and supernatural is also just another plus in my book, because they're hard to find, and I'm glad that I found another series that I really enjoy. Like I said, the timelines were probably my biggest thing. I liked that there was no love triangle, but that the romance was not even remotely close to insta-love. That was fantastic. It took 4 books to develop, and perfect, just perfect. I also really enjoy the covers, just as a side note, because each of the covers has something very specific that is linked importantly to that book, and I thought that was great. The characters develop beautifully over the course of the books, the writing gets better, the plots get better, and I think she did a phenomenal job of keeping each book self-contained, but at the same time expanding the plot and the problems over all 4 books, which can definitely be hard to do. That is my review for the Finishing School series by Gail Carriger. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!